evening, and welcome to a very different regular car reviews. This is a project that I've wanted to start for quite a while, about 4 years now, and that's to tackle the entire text of Theodore Dreiser's sister Carrie. In my opinion, one of the greatest books ever written, and a fine example of early American modernism or realism, which of course is the basis of the silly car review channel. This book was compiled and written approximately in the late 1800s, and the novel itself begins in present day early 1900s. Theodore Dreiser doesn't give an exact date to when this story was taking place, although there are some clues. A few characters say that a war would be good for this country. There are also not really automobiles existing in this novel, but there are electric streetcars. The Sears and Roebuck catalog, at some point, to my knowledge, was referenced, which is a very good clue because the earliest then this novel could have started would be 1889. And in fact, this version of this text, or this book itself, is the same one I used for my master's thesis. And I have a note in here that says story does begin in 1889. I've told students of mine and you that if you want to get good at writing, read some books that were written before cars were invented. This is going to be a very long series of podcasts. Nick Roman will be part of them from time to time, and I'm sure he wouldn't pass up the opportunity of reading the text to you. And I will pay attention to the chat as much as I can while reading a book. I'm getting the chat ready right now so I can make sure it's going. Yes, it's Brown story time. Hello, Mr. Regular. Mr. Regular looking like he's about to tell me he's been expecting me. Well, as usual with these Poang chairs, and when I have my feet up, my ankles will be in rotation the entire time. Mr. Regular, while I'm drunk at 11 p.m., love it. I'm going to give one text to Frederick Knudsen. I am reading a novel while live streaming right now. Share Twitter. Sharing this to Twitter right now. I am reading you a novel right now. Interesting. When you get it right from YouTube, you have to click share twice. Oh, share to Telegram. All right, that's good. Get the live chat back up. Good. Looking like Mr. Regular right now. Hello, everyone. This is Christian Campbell. Good. So, yes, bedtime story. You'll forgive me if I remove my glasses and hold the book, really close to my eyes. How silly does this look? Me holding this. Well, can't even see the screen anymore. So, let's get started. When Caroline Meeber boarded the afternoon train for Chicago, her total outfit consisted of a small trunk, which was checked in the baggage car, a cheap imitation alligator skin satchel holding some minor details of the toilet, which is a fancy way for, as we go through this novel, I'll make translations of what they're talking about. Because again, this is written for people, this book was published in 1900. The first, what a round number to have. And of course, it's taking place around 1889. So there are modest ways of describing something. So when something sounds strange, I'm going to explain what it is. So this novel is starting with a young woman on a train. Very Final Fantasy VII, isn't it? And remember, cameras are a object for the extremely wealthy. So the way realist and modernist novels are written, they're written in tableau. They're written in scenes. Theodore Dreiser is going to explain what's going on here, what everything you see in this scene. If we're talking about film, if this was a film, it would be filmed mise en scene. It would be to set the scene. So in a very Sir Gawain and the Green Knight way, we're going to be able to list everything that's going on in the scene. So again, this adventure story, and Sister Carrie is an amazing adventure story. Our protagonist, our heroine, Carrie Meeber, is on a train. So she had a satchel holding like her toothbrush and maybe some tissues and stuff like that. She also had a small lunch in a paper box and a yellow leather strap purse containing her ticket, a scrap of paper with her sister's address in Van Buren Street, and $4 in money. It was August 1889. She was 18 years of age, bright, timid, and full of the illusions of ignorance and youth. Whatever touch of regret at parting characterized her thoughts, it was certainly not for advantages being given up. A gush of tears at her mother's farewell kiss, a touch in the throat when the cars clacked by the flour mill where her father worked by the day, a pathetic sigh at the familiar green in visions of the village passed in review, and the threads which bound her so lightly to girlhood and home were irretrievably broken. So this young woman, from wherever she was immediately casting off any connection to her hometown. To be sure, she was not conscious of any of this. Any change, however great, might be remedied. There was always the next station where one might descend and return. There was the great city, bound more closely by these very trains which came up daily. Columbia City was not so very far away, even when she was in Chicago. What pray is a few hours? 100 miles? She could go back. And then her sister was there. She looked at the little slip of paper bearing the latter's address and wondered. She gazed at the green landscape now passing in swift review until her swifter thoughts replaced its impression with vague conjectures of what Chicago might be. Since infancy in her ears had been full of its fame. Once the family had thought of moving there. If she secured good employment, they might come now. Anyhow, it was vast. There were lights and sounds and roar of things. People were rich. There were vast depots. This onrushing train was merely speeding to get there. It's okay. This young girl from Columbia City to Chicago. I hope Mike Steinberger is watching because he's from Chicago. And in fact, a good portion of this novel is is in the same way Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a love letter to old Hollywood in the 60s. This is Theodore Dreiser's love letter to Chicago only 11 years prior. We recently did a review of a young man who had a New York City taxi cab, the Crown Vic. And that was a love letter to New York City that was only 11 years ago. So, young woman's going to Chicago. When a girl leaves her home at 18, she does one of two things. Either she falls into saving hands and becomes better, or she rapidly assumes the cosmopolitan standard of virtue and becomes worse. And when Dreiser says the cosmopolitan standard of virtue, that means she becomes a sex worker. Of an indeterminate balance under the circumstances, there is no possibility. The city has its cunning wiles, no less than the infidelity smaller and more human temper. Other than the infinitely smaller and more human temper. There are large forces which allure with all the soulfulness of expression possible in the most cultured human. The gleam of 1,000 lights is often as effective to all moral intents and purposes as the persuasive light in a wooing and fascinating eye. Half of the undoing of the unsophisticated and natural mind is accomplished by forces wholly superhuman. A blare of sound, a roar of life, a vast array of human hives appeal to the astonished senses in equivocal terms. So when you come to a city, you're going to be assaulted into every hole in your head. Without a counselor at hand to whisper cautious interpretations, what falsehoods may not these things breathe into the unguarded ear? Unrecognized for what they are, their beauty, like music, too often relaxes, then weakens, then perverts the simplest human perceptions. I often think as Theodore Dreiser is describing what it's like for a country girl or boy or person coming to a big city and being corrupted is not unlike the uninitiated being assaulted by the internet and the idea of fake news. You can also think of the older generations who don't know how to handle the flood of information coming from every single app. And before you know it, they're wearing a Viking helmet at the state capitol. Caroline, or Sister Carrie, as she had been half affectionately termed by the family, was possessed of a mind rudimentary in its powers of observation and analysis, which is a delightfully 19th century way of Theodore Dreiser to call her basic. Self-interest with her was high, but not strong. It was nevertheless her guiding characteristic. Warm with the fancies of youth, pretty in the insipid prettiness of the formative period, which is his way to saying, Well, she's 18, so she looks good now. God damn, this writer's good. She possessed of a figure which tended toward eventual shapeliness. Wait, let me read that line again. Possessed of a figure which tended toward eventual shapeliness. She doesn't have tits yet, but... And an eye of a light with certain native intelligence. She was a fair example of the middle American class, 2 generations removed from the immigrant. Books were beyond her interest. Knowledge a sealed book. In the intuitive graces, she was still crude. She could scarcely toss her head gracefully. So, you've seen in old movies women do that thing where they flip their hair. Fuck boys do it today as well. She doesn't even know how to do that. She's basic. Her hands were almost ineffectual for the same reason. The feet, though small, were set flatly. And yet she was interested in her charms, meaning she was interested in what she was capable of doing as a young woman. Quick to understand the keener pleasures of life, ambitions to gain in material things. She's a material girl living in a material world. A half-equipped little knight she was. A half-equipped little knight. He's doing some serious foreshadowing here. He just was dismissing her for a while, and now he calls her a knight, someone of noble virtue. A half-equipped little knight she was, venturing to, what is this word? I even have a note here from, almost 20, when did I get my master's? 2010? Over 10 years ago. To reconerate. I even had a word here, look that up. I should have wrote the definition right in the margin. To reconerate the mysterious city and dreaming wild dreams of some vague, far-off supremacy which should make its prey and subject the proper pediment groveling at a woman's slipper. Which my note here from when I was studying the book says, the world's going to be mine. She doesn't have a plan yet, but the world's going to be hers. That, said a voice in her ear, is one of the prettiest little resorts in Wisconsin. She just hears, someone just says something on the train. We've gone this far and no one has spoken yet in this novel, and now here's someone speaking near Carrie on the train. And she hears this person. It is? She answered nervously. The train was just pulling out of Waukesha. For some time, she had been conscious of a man behind, so there was like a man in the seat behind her. She felt him observing her mass of hair. He had been fidgeting with natural intuition. She felt a certain interest growing in that quarter. So she knows this guy is interested her in some way, but she's not sure what to do about it. Her maidenly reserve and a certain sense of what was conventional under the circumstances called for her to foretell and deny this familiarity. So she knows this guy is, I don't know what to make of her, but just ignore him. But the daring and magnetism of the individual, born of past experiences and triumphs, prevailed. So, this guy is older than her. He looks like he's somebody. So, she answered. He leaned forward to put his elbows on the back of her seat and proceeded to make himself volubly agreeable. So he's going to talk very nicely to her. He's behind her in the train seat behind her. And now he's leaning over the seat behind her, looking at her with his elbows on the seat. Yes, that's a great resort for Chicago people. The hotels are as well. Now, this word is going to come up in this novel again and again, resort. Resort, back in those days, nowadays when we think of a resort, we think of like some place at an exotic location, like Cancun or something like that. A resort like Disney World or something like that. But a resort in the 1800s was really more of a kind of a campground. Again, there's no air conditioning. So people in cities would often leave and go into the country and for the summer and stay at what we would consider sort of a condo. Some would have hotels and stuff, but resorts have gone away. You can see the remnants of those places here in Pennsylvania because most of the people from New York City would come to the Appalachian Mountains in Pennsylvania to just get out of the heat of New York City. Mock Chunk, currently Jim Thorpe, was one of these resort towns. People would just, it'd be fun just to go and have someplace cool to hang out. Now, a resort also refers to other things. It can refer to a club. It can refer to a dance hall. Or it could refer to like a venue, or sometimes all three. So if you hear resort, think party club, casino, something like that. Kind of all wrapped up into one. A place to have fun, hang out, have a bar, but also have all the amenities plus rooms and things like that. So anyway, this man says to Carrie, "You are not familiar with this part of the country, are you?" "Oh, yes, I am," answered Carrie. That is, I live in Columbia City. I have never been through here, though." "Ah, so this is your first time to Chicago," he observed. All the time, she was curious of certain features out of the side of her eye. So she's looking at this guy. She's like trying to look at him, but not look like she's looking at him. She's only like half looking at him. Like, who's this guy talking to me? She sees flush, colorful cheeks, a light mustache, a gray fedora hat. Even now, if I'd be teaching like this, oh, this guy's wearing a fedora. He's a nice guy. She now turned and looked upon him in full. The instincts of self-protection and coquetry, that's another word after we'll call it, coquetry, mingling confusely in her brain. Let's look up that word right now. Coquetry. Let's see if you can do it faster than I can. Let's see. It is... It's fascinating how language, some words just fall out of favor while we create new ones. COQUETRY. Flirtatious behavior or flirtatious manner. I like the way you laugh, he said without coquetry. Okay, coquetry. So, coquetry, talking and shooting your shot. So this guy already saw Carrie and already he's making moves. If you don't like this guy, good. Because Theodore Dreiser is already doing his job. Self-protection and coquetry mingling confusely in her brain. I didn't say that, she said. Oh, he answered in a very pleasing way and with an assumed air of mistake. I thought you did. Here was the type of the traveling canvasser for a manufacturing house. A class which at the time was first being dubbed by the slang term of the day, drummers. So, who this guy is, Theodore Dreiser is telling us that he's a traveling salesman, which we can just imagine what he is. He's trying to drum up business for some sort of manufacturer. He came within the meaning of a still newer term which had sprung into general use among Americans in 1880, which concisely expressed the thoughts of the thought of one whose dress or manners are in such to impress strongly the fancy or elicit the admiration of susceptible young women, a masher. If this were 20 years ago, we'd say that this guy is dressed kind of like a pimp a little way. Although he's obviously not in the sex trade. He's just trying to go from town to town to sell interest in some sort of manufacturer. Like, hey, you should let us build a factory in your town. His clothes were of an impressive character. The suit being cut of striped and a cross pattern of brown wool, very popular at the time. It was what had since become known as a business suit. The low crotch of the vest revealed a stiff shirt bosom of white and pink stripes, surmounted by a high white collar about which was fastened the tie of a distinct pattern. From his coat sleeves protruded a pair of linen cuffs of the same material as the shirt and fastened with large gold plate buttons set with the common yellow agitates known as cat eyes. So this guy is dressed very loudly. He has all sorts of different colors going on and jewelry on. His fingers bore several rings. He doesn't have one, he has several. Dreiser doesn't say how many, but enough to notice. One of the ever-enduring heavy seal, and from his vest dangled a neat gold watch chain from which was suspended the secret insignia of the Order of the Elks. The whole suit was rather tight-fitting, and was finished off with broad-soled tan shoes, highly polished, and the gray felt hat then denominated fedora. He was, for the order of intellect representative, attractive, and whatever he had to recommend him, you may be sure, was not lost upon Carrie in this first glance. Lest this order of individuals should permanently pass, let me put down some of the most striking characteristics of his most successful manner and method. Good clothes, of course, were the first essential, the things without which he was nothing. Let me say that again. Good clothes, of course, were the first essential, the things without which he was nothing. So this guy was kind of his clothes. He's a walking dresser. A strong physical nature accumulated by a keen desire of the feminine was the next. Okay, so this guy likes girls. A free mind of any consideration of problems or forces of the world, and this is me pausing, singing a word I can't remember. I'm going to substitute attached not by greed, but by an insatiable love of variable pleasure, women pleasure. His method was always simple. Its principal element was daring, meaning courage, backed, of course, by an intense desire and admiration for the sex. So, in modern terms, we would call whoever this guy is, He's a salesman. He dresses very flashy. He's a pickup artist. So all this let him meet with young women twice upon the third meeting. So let him meet with a young woman twice, and upon the third meeting, he would walk up and straighten her necktie for her and perhaps address her by her first name. So by the third time he meets a girl, he's making excuses to touch her body. You know, oh, let me get this for you, and making sure. Notice that he would always go for the neck. Interesting. If an attractive woman should design a glance of interest in passing him upon the street, he would run up, seize her by the hand in feigned acquaintanceship, and convince her that they met before, providing, of course, that his pleasing way interest her in knowing him further. In the great department stores, he was at ease in capturing attention of some young woman, while waiting for the cash boy to come back with his change. In some cases, by those little wiles common to the type, he would find out the girl's name, her favorite flower, where a note would reach her. Now, that's important. Where a note would reach her. Again, 1889. There's not really telephones. There's telegraphs. There's letters. But if you wanted to get a message to a girl or anyone clandestinely, you couldn't just mail it to her house, because then her father would get it, her mother would get it, other people would get it. So you had to find out where a woman was going to be and make sure a letter goes there and not to her house. So this guy was already trying to figure out, well, maybe I can send a letter to her work, wherever she works, or her friend's house, or something like that. And perhaps persuade the delicate task of friendship until it proved unpromising for one aim in view, where it then would be relinquished. Let me say that again. He would pursue the delicate task of friendship until it proved unpromising for the one aim in view, where it would be relinquished. So he'd pretend to be the friend until he realized he's not getting ass, until he's not going to get the bust, and then he just tosses the girl aside. One sec. The key to reading these novels is to go slow. Don't try to read them fast. They take a while. I have a lot of messages held for review. Wearing a beanie indoors. Yes, it's cold here. I'm going to be haunted by not knowing what that word was all night. Okay. What's my shoe size? I don't know. Poop stories on you, yes. Which reminds me, I gotta turn the heat down so I can sleep tonight. So we're still talking about who this guy is that's talking to Sister Carrie. He would do very well with more pretentious women, though the burden of expense was a slight deterrent. Upon entering a parlor car at St. Paul, for instance, he would select the chair next to the most promising bit of femininity and soon inquired if she cared to have the shade lowered. Before the train cleared the yards, he would have the porter bring her a footstool. At the next lull in his conversational progress, he would find her something to read, and from then on, by a dint of compliment generally insinuated, personal narrative, exaggeration, and service, he would win her tolerance and mayhap regard. So he has this whole method of talking to women. Those who have ever delved into the depths of a woman's conscience must, at some time or other, have come upon that mystery of mysteries, the moral significance to her of clothes. A woman should someday write the complete philosophy of that subject. No matter how young she is, it is one of the things she wholly comprehends. There is an indescribably faint line in the matter of a man's apparel which somehow divides her from those who are worth glancing at and those who are not. Once an individual has passed this faint line, on the way downward he will get no glance from her. There is another line at which the dress of a man will cause her to study her own. This line the individual at her elbow now marked for Carrie. She became conscious of an inequality. Her own plain blue dress, with its black cotton tape trimmings, realized itself to her imagination as shabby. She felt the worn state of her shoes. He mistook this thought wave, which caused her to withdraw her glance and turn for relief to the landscape outside, for some little gain in his grace, for some little gain in his grace had brought him. "Let's see," he went on. "I know quite a number of people in your town. Morganruth, the clothier, and Gibson, the dry goods man." "Oh, you do," she interrupted, aroused by memories of longings and displays in the latter's establishment had cost her. At last he had a clue to her interest and followed it up deftly. In a few minutes he had come about into her seat. So in a few minutes he had gone from behind her. Now he just sat down right next to her now. He talked of sales of clothing, his travels, Chicago, and the amusements of that city. "If you are going there, you will enjoy it immensely. Have you relatives?" "I'm going to visit my sister," she explained. "You will want to see Lincoln Park," he said, "and Michigan Avenue. They are putting up great buildings there. It's second to New York. Great. So much to see. Theaters, crowds, fine houses. Oh, you will like that." There was a little ache in her fancy of all he described. Her insignificance in the presence of so much magnificence faintly affected her. She realized that hers was not to be a round of pleasure, and yet there was something promising in all the material prospect he set forth. There was something satisfactory in the attention of this individual with his good clothes. She could not help smiling as he told her of some popular actress she reminded him of. She was not silly, and yet attention of this sort had its weight. "You will be in Chicago some little time, won't you?" he observed, at one turn of the now easy conversation. I don't know, said Carrie vaguely, a flash vision of the possibility of her not securing employment rising in her mind. Several weeks, anyhow, he said, looking steadily into her eyes. There was much more passing now than the mere words indicated. He recognized the indescribable thing that made for fascination and beauty in her. She realized that she was of interest to him from the one standpoint which a woman both delights in and fears. Her manner was simple, though for the very reason that she had not yet learned the many little affections with which women conceal their true feelings, some things did appear bold. A clever companion, had she never had one, would have warned her never to look a man in the eyes so steadily. "Why do you ask?" she said. "Well, I'm going to be there several weeks. I'm going to study stock at our new place and get some new samples. I might show you around." "I don't know whether you can or not. I don't know whether I can. I shall be living with my sister and..." "Well, if she minds, we'll fix that." He took out his pencil and a little pocket notebook as if it were all settled. "What's your address?" He goes right for the close. She fumbled her purse, which contained the address slip. He reached down in his hip pocket and took out a fat purse. Notice that it says purse. The idea of a wallet for men, or any a wallet for women, a wallet for everybody, didn't really be invented yet. You kind of referred to everything as purses. And that's also because, money was so deflated by our sense of standard. Most people were carrying around coins anyway. So you really need something like a small bag. The folding money people really didn't deal with. That's, where's our inflation calculator? What did she have with her? $4? $4 to her name? Oh, we have one super chat. From New Zealand, enjoyed the Fox Body review. If you think 5.0 is outdated in 1993, Ford Australia kept it around until 2003. Check out the TS50 Falcon for the Lax Factory high-performance Windsor. Nice. Hey, thank you for the donation. SMH says, you ever come to Philly? Yeah, I'm there quite a bit. I was there a couple days ago. SMH says, I love your voice and your mannerism. I just can't stop staring at the TV screen and watching your stocking feet and the way you wiggle your feet. I'm not a foot guy. It's just, this is a thing that I do. Anyway. Does sister mean none? No, it was just a pet name that this woman had. So, anyway. Oh, yeah, we were going to look up inflation calculator. Let's see if you get it before I do. How late can we go? How far back does this go? It goes to 1913, so we only get an approximate amount. All right. So if she had $4 on her there, it means she has $120 on her. So she's got to get her life started in Chicago for $120. She fumbled for her purse, which contained the address slip. He reached down in his hip pocket. Again, hip pocket, not back pocket, hip pocket. And took out a fat purse. It was filled with slips of paper, some mileage books, a roll of greenbacks, and so on. Yeah, it says greenbacks. We don't really use the term greenbacks anymore to refer to money, or paper money. It impressed her deeply Such a purse had never been carried by any man who had been so attentive to her before. Indeed, a man who traveled, who was brisk and experienced and of the world, had never come within such a close range before. The purse, the shiny tan shoes, the smart new suit, and the air which he did things built up for her a dim world of fortune around him, of which he was the center. It disposed her pleasantly toward all he might do. So she's essentially being tricked by this guy, by his showiness. That does not mean that this man isn't successful. It just means his presentation all has a purpose. He took out a neat business card on which was engraved Bartlett, Crayo and Company, and down in the left-hand corner, Chaz H. Drouet. "That's me," he said, putting the card in her hand and touching his name. "It's pronounced Drouet. Our family was French on my father's side." She looked at it while he put it up his purse. I wonder if that's a typo in this book. She looked at it while he put it up his purse, and then he got out a letter from a bunch in his coat pocket. "This is the house I travel for." And when he says house, he means company. He went on, pointing to a picture of it. The corner of State and Lake. There was pride in his voice. He felt like it was something to be connected with such a place, and he made her feel that way. "What is your address?" he began again, fixing his pencil to write. She looked at his hand. "Carrie Meeber," she said slowly. 354 West Van Buren Street, care of S.C. Hansen. He wrote it carefully down and got out his purse again. "So you'll be at home if I come around Monday night?" He said. "I think so," she answered. How true it is. My head's getting cold. I need to tape this book back together again. How true it is that words are but vague shadows of the volumes we mean. I have a note here from an earlier version of myself that says this is deconstruction. Little audible links they are, chaining together great inaudible feelings and purposes. Here were these two, bandying little phrases, drawing purses, looking at cards, and both unconscious about how inarticulate all the real feelings were. Neither was wise enough to be sure of the workings of the mind of the other. He could not tell how his luring succeeded. She could not realize that she was drifting until he secured her address. Now she felt that she had yielded something, that he had gained a victory. Already they felt they were somehow associated. Already he took control in directing the conversation. His words were easy. Her manner was relaxed. They were nearing Chicago. Already the signs were numerous. Trains flashed by them. Across wide stretches of flat open prairie, they could see lines of telegraph poles stalking across the fields toward the great city. Away off there were indications of suburban towns, some big smokestacks towering high in the air. Frequently there were two-story frame houses standing out in the open fields without fence or trees, outposts of the approaching army of homes. To the child, the genius with imagination, or the wholly untraveled, the approach to a great city for the first time is a wonderful thing, particularly if it's evening. That mystic period between the glare and the gloom of the world when life is changing from one sphere or condition to another. The promise of the night. What does it not hold for the weary? What old illusion of hope is not here forever repeated? Says the soul of the toiler to itself. I shall soon be free. I shall be in the ways and the hosts of the merry. So I shall be in the ways and the hosts of the merry means I'm going to go to a whole lot of parties and people are going to welcome me and stuff and I'm going to have a good time. The streets, the lamp, and the lighted chambers set for dining are for me. The theaters, the halls, the parties, the ways of the rest and the paths of the song, these are mine in the night. I'm reminded of traveling to New York City on a bus. It's not too far from here. Or even coming into Chicago myself, because this is the city Carrie Meeber is approaching. When all those lights and those rows of lights come in, of course, now we see them from a plane, and it looks probably even more spectacular. Through all the humanity still being closed in the shops, the thrill runs abroad. It is in the air. The dullest, stupid people, feel something which they may not always express or describe. It is the lifting of the burden of the toil. This is a line that burden and toil is sort of a motif going on in this adventure story. And just like a train, it takes a while to get started, but when it does, you will be rewarded. So it is the lifting of the burden of the toil is a way to describe going into the city on a Friday night after the workday is done. Sister Carrie gazed out of the window. Her companion, this Charles A. Drouet or Chaz A. Drouet, so contagious are affected. He's looking too. So contagious are all things. Felt anew with some interest in the city, and he pointed out the marvels. Already the vast network of tracks, the sign and the insignia of Chicago stretched on either hand. There were thousands of cars and a clangor of engine bells. At the sides of this traffic stream stood dingy houses, smoky mills, tall elevators. Through the evidences of the stretching city could be seen. Streetcars waited at crossings for the train to go by. And of course, streetcars, if you live in Toronto, you know what I'm talking about when I say a streetcar. Even I think I was just with a friend, Media has a streetcar. A streetcar doesn't mean an automobile. It means a small train, and there are tracks on the street itself, and it runs on that. Streetcars waited at crossings for the train to go by. Gatemen toiled at wooden arms which closed the streets. Bells clanged, the rails clacked, whistles sounded afar off. This is northwest Chicago, said Drouet. This is the Chicago River. He pointed to a little muddy creek crowded with huge masted wanderers from far-off waters, noting the black posted blanks. With a puff and a clang and a clatter of rails, it was gone. Chicago is getting to be a great town, he went on. It's a wonder. You'll find lots to see here. She did not hear this very well. Her heart was troubled by a kind of terror. The fact that she was alone, away from home, rushing into a great sea of life and endeavor, began to tell. She could not help but feel a little choked for breath, a little sick at her heart, a little sick as her heart beat so fast. She half closed her eyes and tried to think it was nothing, that Columbia City was only a little way off. So she's starting to feel a little bit scared at seeing Chicago for the first time coming up. You know, it's almost midnight. I may wrap this up soon. David Hessler doesn't have a question, but thank you for the donation. And probably for the future one, I'm not going to include my feet in this, since people seem to be wholly preoccupied with it. A tram, if you will. Yes, said it's Matto. Yes. Holy moly, donate to him already, yeah. 8-Bit Brody said, did you feel scared when you first saw Chicago? You know what, a little bit. But I had some people needed me at the airport, so it was all right. I need regular audiobooks. Let's move this camera, why don't we? And that is all the cable we have to move the camera there. Also, we can't hear you now that you're off mic. All right. Wonder if Fred actually came in. No, didn't even see my post. Well, you know what? It's midnight, and I think this is a good place to stop. Carrie's approaching Chicago and feeling a little apprehensive about it. So, that's it. Thank you for watching regular car reviews, or in this case, regular book reviews. We're going to make it. We're going to make it all the way through this novel. You and me together. So, if you're listening to this at night, or maybe listening to it later, hopefully Nick will add it all up. Nah, he doesn't have to add it together. Just post it up individually. And we'll make it through this. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.